with us, the Holy One that seems to be so distant from us most of the time, unites with the Shekhinah that is present with us all the time. And so when we sing this song, we actually sing words of encouragement to the Shekhinah. We say things like, lift yourself up and shake off the dust, and array yourself in beauty, O my people. At hand is Bethlehem's David, bringing deliverance into our life. We say, the scavengers are scattered, and the devourers have fled. As a bridegroom rejoices in his bride, your God takes joy in you. So we're going to sing this to a very, very beautiful and joyful melody. O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla. We'll do verses 1, verse 2, and then verse 9. And on verse 9 we rise and we face the entrance to the room, and on the fourth line, when we say, Boi Kala, enter, O bride, we imagine that is the moment at which that special spirit of peace and unity and harmony enters not just this room, but all of our hearts and maybe all of the world. Lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla. Verse 1. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad Ishmi'anu el hamyuchad Adonai echad U'shamo echad L'shem ultiferet ve'letchila L'echad dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla L'echad dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla. Verse 2. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla Lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla. I invite you to rise if you wish and face towards the entrance of the room. Verse 9. Boi b'shalom ateret ba'ala gam besimcha uvetzola toch emunei am segula Boi chala O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla O lecha dodi likrat kala B'nei Shabbat nekabla. Bella. Turn to page 140, and we remain standing. 142. We remain standing for the call. 146. For the call to prayer. I'll call the formal call to prayer. We've been doing quite a lot of praying so far. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed. You may be seated. And we'll sing on page 148, Ha'ma'ariv Aravim, the one who speaks the evening into being, opening the gates and altering time and changing the scenes. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro mariv arabim bechokma poteach sharim ובתבונה משנה עתים ומחליף את הזמנים ומסדר את הכוכבים במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו בורא יום ולילה גולל אור מפני חושך וחושך מפני אור וחושך מפני אור ומעביר יום ומביא לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב ערבים. Turn the page. Ahavat olam et Yisrael Amcha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נהגי יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. We turn the page 152. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Page 154. We'll chant together the V'ahavta, the first paragraph of the Shema, and then we'll read it together in the English on that page. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. In English, you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Turning to page 158. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar bakodesh, Nora tehilot osefele, Nora tehilot osefele, Mahalechutecha ra'u vanecha, בוקע הים לפני משה ומרים, אלי ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ילילה לילה לילה ילילה לילה ילילה לילה לילה ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We turn the page. Actually, we're going to begin on page 161 with the first two lines. Let there be love and understanding among us. And then we go back to page 160 and sing in the Hebrew. And we know this in two parts, so don't hold back, right? Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu, Hashkivenu Le'shalom. Hashki, let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Let's read the words of this prayer. This is a prayer we do only in the evening, but we do it every evening, and I think it's something we all want to pray. And then we'll complete the prayer with the Chatima, with the seal of the prayer, asking for peace Aleinu, on us, Al Kol Am Yisrael, and the whole people of Israel, Ve'al Yerushalayim. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace, and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace, and guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and our coming to life and to peace evermore. Baruch atah, atah Adonai hapo, sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Ve'al Yerushalayim ve'al kol amo. Ve'al Yerushalayim shalom. Baruch atah, atah Adonai hapores sukat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael. Shalom amo Yisrael. So we come to private prayer, the Amidah. The only thing that's important about this part of the service is that we stand up. It'll be done, so you can already stand right now. And if you wish, you got up real quick. That's great. Let's all stand. We're on page 164. Page 164. And, in the evening, they say that the Amidah, the prayer, is what they call Reshut. That means it's not obligatory. You may say all the words that are in the prayer book, or you may not. I guess sometimes the rabbis will say that when they can't quite decide whether it must be said or could be said or might be said. So tonight, I think what we're just going to do is I'd like to do a reading on page 165, and then I want us to sing this kind of intention on page 164, which is a verse from the Psalms that asks Adonai, asks the Holy One, to open our lips that we might find within us the words that can express what we wish to pray, that can express what we are praying for and hoping for. And along those lines, we might want to use the words that are in the prayer book. If those work for you, we might just want to flip through and find something that opens up a door for us. So we might just want to use the time to be together in the silence. And when you finished your private prayer, you may be seated. So I'll just say, as it says in the middle of page 165, prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits and God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not be able to bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul and mend a broken heart and rebuild a weakened will. Ananana svatai tiftach. Ananana ufi akid tehilatecha. Ananana Adonai. Ananana svatai tiftach. Ananana ufi akid tehilatecha. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi akid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. So I'm on page 180 in the towards the bottom of the page. The second paragraph from the bottom. We're going to pray that the words of our mouth and the meditations of the heart, whatever the heart has spoken, with or without words, be acceptable as prayer tonight. Yehiyu leratzon imrefi v'hegyon leibi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri Begoali. Your permission, I'm going to put on a capo. That might make it easier for you to sing it with me. Yehiyu leratzon imrefi v'hegyon libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri Adonai tzuri Begoali And at the bottom of the page Oh say shalom bimrama Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael le'imru amen. Yaseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ya'kol Yisrael, ve'imeru. So I want to offer a chance to do a prayer of healing and Misha Beirach. If you wish to mention the name of a person for whom you're praying for healing, or to speak that word silently to yourself, as we go around the sanctuary, I invite you to speak the name out loud. Let's pray together. Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Beirach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotein. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Amen. So this week is Shabbat Shemot. Tomorrow morning, when we take the Torah out of the Ark, we'll be beginning to read from the second book of the Torah. It's a very, very dramatic portion. It has everything that you can find in the film Prince of Egypt. Not quite the whole thing, but at least the very beginning of the story of the redemption. First of all, the enslavement, the Pharaoh who forgets all the good that Joseph had done, and then our people becoming enslaved, and then the beginnings of the redemption. We learn about the character Moses, and in this portion, we have the famous encounter of Moses with God at the burning bush. So I hope that you all got a text sheet when you came in. If you didn't, are there any in the back there? Does everybody have one of these? Everybody get one? Great. Some of you even read it online, which is great. And those of you who are online, it should be there with the service materials, and you can follow along with us. I'm not going to tell the whole story about Moses' career, but one day, just suddenly out of the blue, as we all remember from all those children's Bible books, Moses maybe is chasing a sheep that had got out of the way, and having his eye on every single member of his flock. A shepherd knows his flock like the back of his hand, and follows the sheep according to the Midrash, and comes to a place where he sees a bush that is burning but is not consumed. And in that moment at the top of the page, right, is the whole description of how God speaks to Moses out of the fire and gives him the command or the order to go down to Egypt and to assume his responsibility and his role in being a spokesperson and leader and bringing the people of Israel out of Egypt. But then Moses, if we get on to the text where we have both the Hebrew and the English, we have what I always find an extremely remarkable redundancy. Two paragraphs, one right after the other, with no connection in between them, just one right after another, where Moses says to God, well, when I come to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is God's name? What shall I say to them? And God says to Moses, and here we just have the Hebrew, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which literally means, I will be what I will be. And then as kind of a knock-knock joke, continuing, thus shall you say to the Israelites, knock, knock, who's there? Ehyeh, who, Ehyeh sent me to you. Like, what kind of an answer is that? Ehyeh sent me to you, right? I am sent me to you. So God introduces God. Moses asks for a name. Moses wants a name. He says, what can we call you? What's your name? And of course, as we know, a name is contains really the essence of a person, right? A person, a name. In English, in Hebrew, the word Shem, and the word for a noun is the same word. It's a thing. It's what the thing is, the name. So when God says Ehyeh asher ehyeh, we're to understand that that name also tells us something about what God is or how God is, right? And then, without skipping a beat, God further said to Moses, thus shall you speak to the Israelites, Yud-He Vav-He. Yeah, traditionally we read Adonai, or the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and Jacob has sent me to you. This shall be my name forever. So, curious minds want to know what happens between those two paragraphs. God has given a perfectly good name, and then suddenly God says, well, you know what? Here's another name. Okay? So, now there's nothing wrong with the second name, by the way. The second name is a beautiful name. It's actually a mysterious and miraculous name. It's really, for those of you who can kind of picture it in the Hebrew, it's 4 letters that sort of are, if you could take the verb to be in English and make one word that includes will be, is, and was, okay? You could try to do that now if you want, but you won't be able to. But if you could, that's pretty much what this name is, Yud-He Vav-He. It's the verb to be, and it implies was, is, and will be, all in 4 letters, right? So that's a pretty amazing name too, if you think about it. But we don't actually say that name. When we come to that name in the prayer book, we say Adonai, right? Which means my Lord, my Master, Almighty, whatever word it is. So I always wondered, what happens between those 2 paragraphs, right? And I always imagine, or I think, that when God says Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I will be what I will be, that it's like not what Moses was expecting. Or maybe God is looking at Moses' kind of expression like, okay, he doesn't get it. Or maybe Moses is thinking, I can't go to the people of Israel with this name. This is just not going to work for me. And so God says, okay, Yahweh, right? Yehovah, whatever you want to pronounce it, Adonai. You want to try and say God's name? Let's try it. Right. And I think what it means is that in that space, right, God is actually revealing a very great secret to us that maybe is just a little too much for us to think about. And so instead, God gives another name that is going to be used from here on out throughout the Bible. We will never again see the name Ehyeh in the Bible, but we'll see all the time these 4 syllables, Yud-He Vav-He Adonai. So Ehyeh is a different way of thinking about God. Last year I shared a couple of different understandings of this very elusive word, one by Eric Fromm, who says that Ehyeh, meaning I will be what I will be, means that I, God, am in the process of becoming. Neither I nor human understanding of me is complete, and you, human beings, fashioned in the image of God, are also in the process of becoming. And Martin Buber actually said that the name of God is not a noun, but a verb. Okay, I will be what I will be is a verbal construction. It's an action verb. It's something that is about being and not something about a name. It's not fixed, right? And what he derives from that is that the name of God is not a noun, he says, and the essence of Jewish theology is not the nature of God, what God is, but rather the actions of God, what God does. Tonight I want to take that one step further, because you might have been here last year when we talked about that. If not, you missed it. You can go back and find it on the YouTube. But I want to tell you a little bit about a movement in philosophy that I've always found very meaningful. And it's a movement that was born in the last century, and it's called process theology, process thinking. And it's usually associated with a person named Alfred North Whitehead, who died in 1947. But if you think about it, process, or becoming, right, actually takes its cue from this name. Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. And before we go any further, first of all, I know you didn't come here tonight for a theology class or a philosophy class, but just to adopt this way of thinking about process, God as something in process, means that we need to be open to giving up some things that maybe give us some comfort, things that maybe give us some consolation. For example, the idea that God is unchanging, or that God is perfect just as God is, or that God can control certain things in the world, or that God can guarantee a meaning for us. But if we're willing to sort of detach a little bit from those ideas, we might just find that process theology, as I want to suggest to you tonight, gives us an interesting way of thinking about God. So Bradley Sharvit Artson, if you want to listen to a podcast, he does a beautiful job. He's a Jewish teacher at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles. Does a wonderful job of laying out sort of the Jewish idea behind process philosophy. But he says, that we don't even notice how much we have absorbed kind of the God of the philosophers, which is an omni-God. And I'm not talking about the hotel. It's the omnipotent, right? Omniscient, right? All-powerful, all-wise, all-good, right? This omni-God. But there is no word for almighty in the Bible. There just is never a word for that. We see it in a lot of our prayer books, but the Torah doesn't have any word like that, almighty, okay? And omniscient, in some ways, these are problematical words, because omniscient means that there's no freedom in the future because everything is known. And perfect means not able to change, because if something else will be different, it'll be better or worse. And if we hold on to these ideas, then God, the idea we have, is very static. But as we know in the Bible and the Torah, and also in rabbinic literature, there are many, many, many more images for God. We have a God who gets angry, a God who is sad, a God who regrets. In rabbinic literature, a God who weeps, even suffers. There's the Shekhinah, which we just talked about, the aspect of the divine who clings to Israel and suffers along with us in exile, and who in this unredeemed world needs to be strengthened by us, by her lovers, as we just sang in L'Chadodi. And if we look at it really directly, the God of the Bible, even in the Bible, is always changing and responding to events and meeting people in relationship and learning and being disappointed in relationship with the world. So process thinking sort of takes the idea that God does not stand outside the universe, an eternal being that created the world, then stands back and lets the world go on its merry way, aside from speaking a commandment from time to time, or splitting a Red Sea, or making a miracle from time to time, but generally letting the world go its way. But rather, in process theology, in process thinking, God shares the experience of all creatures and is experienced by all creatures. And God, like us and the world, is always in process and is always changing. And if you think about it, there are some Jewish texts that we know very well that sort of reflect this, right? We say, nothing that happens in the world and creation escapes God's perception and experience. We say, Melo kol haaretz kevodo. The whole earth is full of God's glory. We call God makom, hamakom, right? Which means the place. And the rabbis comment on that term that God is the place of the world, right? That's why we call God makom, because God is the place in which the world exists. And if you know a little bit about Kabbalah, the whole idea of Kabbalah is that all of creation is a permutation of certain divine attributes that combine and recombine and are sometimes united and sometimes broken. So God-like creation is always in process. And maybe there's a reason why process thinking became attractive, especially in the last century. We can all understand that the concept of an all-powerful and all-good God wasn't looking so good after the horrors of the Holocaust, for example. And Hans Jonas, who was a German Jewish philosopher, wrote an essay in 1953 called The Concept of God After Auschwitz. And Jonas was not the only, but he was one of several theologians who tried to give some new images, sometimes to save and sometimes to reject these classical views of theology. And actually, if you Google Hans Jonas, you'll also see that he's sometimes referred to as the father of environmental ethics, the idea that human beings have responsibilities to creation and to the cosmos. And I hope you'll see how these two ideas come together in his thinking. So he arrives at this idea through a version of process thought, this idea that God is completely immanent and present in the world with nothing that's divine that remains outside of it, which actually is another way of maybe saying that creation itself is sacred and holy, because it is the divine, right? And that maybe we have some responsibilities towards it. And so to illustrate what this theology might look like, he tells a story, or actually brings us a myth based on his own research into some ancient Gnostic texts. And the myth is on the back of that page, and I invite us to look at it and to read it, and then tell me what you think about it. I'll read it. You can tell me what you think about it. In the beginning, for unknowable reasons, the ground of being, or the divine, chose to give itself over to the chance and risk and endless variety of becoming, and wholly so. Entering into the adventure of space and time, the deity held back nothing of itself. No uncommitted or unimpaired part remained to direct or correct or ultimately guarantee the devious working out of its destiny in creation. In order that the world might be and be for itself, God renounced God's own being, divesting himself of his deity, in order to receive it back from the odyssey of time, weighted with the chance harvest of the experience in time, an experience which cannot be foreseen, transfigured, or perhaps even disfigured by it. And in such self-forfeiture, forfeiting of the self, of divine integrity for the sake of an unprejudiced becoming, no other knowledge can be admitted than that of possibilities, which the cosmic being offers in its own terms. To these, God committed God's cause in effacing God's self for the world. So I'll just say that a little simpler. For reasons that we don't know, God decided to enter into creation, not just to create creation and stay back, but to enter into it, and to leave back all those aspects of control and will and power and coercion, and to just be part of creation, to be a part of creation, maybe the highest part of creation, maybe the best part of creation, but to be totally involved in the unfolding of the world, in the unfolding of the species, in the unfolding of history, in the unfolding of humanity. And before humankind comes around, right, in life's innocence, before the advent of knowledge of good and evil, God cannot go wrong. Because every new development, and this is kind of evolution here, is a new modality for God's trying out God's hidden essence and discovering himself through the surprises of world adventure. Evolution provides all of this through what Jonas calls the mere lavishness of play and the sternness of its spur. So God, as evolution evolves, right? The avocado gets a large pit, and the dogs lose their tails. Whatever happens in evolution, there's really no good or no bad about it. It's just how things develop. It's almost there's a sense of play about it, but also an inexorable moving forward, because that's how evolution moves according to certain laws, and God is sort of expressed in that. But then, with the advent of humankind, he says that with the advent of a creature possessed of knowledge and freedom, then the image of God, which was haltingly begun by the universe, suddenly passes into humanity's precarious trust to be completed, saved, or spoiled by what humankind will do to itself and to the world. And in this awesome impact of humankind's deed on God's destiny lies the immortality of humankind. So that until the human being comes into the evolutionary picture, God is safe, if you will. Once humankind comes in with the ability to change creation, to know good from evil, to act upon creation and change it, then the destiny of God, what God's image will be like in the end, is suddenly very precarious. And it depends on human beings, sort of co-depends. We kind of depend on God, and God depends on us. So what we do, right, what every human being does, doesn't just affect our image or who we are, but in process theology actually affects what God is and who God is. And so they use the expression, which you have at the bottom of the page, instead of being created in the image of God, we are created for the image of God. That is, that what God will look like, what God will be like, is going to be the result of an interaction between ourselves and the world. No? What do you think? Does that make you feel better or worse? Worse. Why do you say worse? How much worse could it be, by the way? Huh? Oh, it's terrible to be dependent on human beings. I agree with you on that. Yeah, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. But what about this idea? Does this idea appeal to anybody? Does anybody like this idea? In order to be part of the universe, in order not to remain aloof from the universe, God gives up coercive power, right? The ability to determine things, and just puts God's self into the stream of life, into the stream of creation and the stream. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it would be. It would be a God that doesn't intervene. Right, that once the human being comes into the creative picture, the picture of creation, the human being is the one who has free will to act in the world, and God in some ways is dependent, upon what we do or don't do. Then what's the purpose of prayer? Oh, so that's another question. What I'll tell you is that, or you could actually ask the question, so how does God affect us at all? Right? And prayer would be trying to discern maybe how God affects us or how we can affect God. And in process theology, they say that God does not have any coercive power, but God still has persuasive power. And they use the term that you have at the bottom of the page. They talk about it as the lure. The lure. God is like a lure. I'm not a fisherman. And I know that sometimes lures are ugly little things that you make out of all kinds of creatures, but I don't think that the process philosophers knew that. A lure is something that draws you, that pulls you, okay? And that's the language that they use. God has a lure, right? It's perhaps the initial aim, right? That maybe what God wanted to end up at. Or it's an orientation, right? A mute insistence, an appeal to an unfulfilled goal, which is a good goal. And that God has the ability to lure us or to pull us towards the good. Right? Not to force us, not to enter into things and change things, but still retains the power of persuasion. So prayer, for example, if you think about God this way, is trying to get in touch with what we know, right, is the good, and to try to figure out how we need to be oriented to, what is What is pulling us, right? In what direction do we need to be pulled as we take our next action, right? Yeah. I mean, if we want to take a process view of God, we're going to have to reinterpret every single word in the Bible and every single story in the Bible. Because the stories of the Bible are written with the second paragraph, the Almighty of the Lord, dot, 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 dot. But I think what I'm suggesting today is that God actually revealed a different way of being in the world. Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. But the Bible is written with this other view: God who commands, God who intervenes, God who splits the seas, God who punishes. That's the language of the Bible. But maybe it's only the second best way of thinking about God, right? Maybe the first best way is the one that initially God speaks to Moses, saying, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I am in the process of becoming. I'm just becoming and being with the world. That's what God is, this power in the world that is becoming and that is pulling us and orienting us towards the good. Yeah. Or to be a part of the stream of life, put it that way, right? That this is sort of like the life force, that God is part of it as well. God sets it in motion and then is part of it as well. Yeah. I wouldn't say human-like, because, they sort of think, when they talk about the image of God in process philosophy is the sum total of all the events and the actions of the world. Both the physical world, right, the way the world looks, and also the moral world and the human world. So at any one moment, at this moment in time, God is the sum total of everything that has happened before and the direction that it's moving. But God doesn't have really any coercive power to change anything, only to lure us. Yeah, Angie. Yeah. I pray for you. I pray for your peace. If we gave up the idea that God's around to fix everything for us, then maybe we take a little more responsibility ourselves, maybe is what you're saying. Yeah, perhaps. Well, there's still great stories, aren't there? I mean, they're great stories, and the story of Adonai, right, the Lord, right, liberating us from Egypt and bringing down the most powerful empire, and making the statement that human beings are meant to be free, and that even the most powerful evil empire will one day fall to the goodness of freedom. And that's a great story. I'm not against that story. It's a good story, but it's not necessarily telling us how God actually works in the world. It's just a good story. Right? Yeah. 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 Well, when you say maybe it was God, I'm not against that way of thinking about it. But like maybe if we sort of really could embrace this kind of a way of thinking, so we could say, just like we read before, right? God may not bring water to parched fields, or mend a broken bridge, or rebuild
a city, but prayer, right, or being pulled towards God can water an arid soul, or mend a broken heart, or restore a wounded will. Like those are things that, yeah, we do think God can do, even in this understanding, right? That's the lure, right? That's the thing that can pull us, that thing that can orient us, that we actually experience in ourselves, knowing that it's there. But we're not expecting anybody else to do it for us. It's just the pull. It's just the pull. Either God could but didn't, or God can, or God can't, right? And neither one is suitable. Yeah. Right. Well, I think the process theologian would say being created for God's image being what's at the end of time. As it says here, that God puts God's self, renounces God's own being to receive it back, right, from the odyssey of time, weighted with all the chance harvest of experience in time. That when we say, as we will say in just a moment, Bayom Hahu, on that day, Yeh Adonai Echad, God will be one, Ushemo Echad, and God's name, meaning what's God's name? God's true reality, right? God's true essence will be one. So that implies that we're not there yet, right? That's why we say Bayom Hahu. So that all of life is like a movement towards that day, towards that Yom Hahu. And on that day, when we arrive there, hopefully the lure will have pulled us towards something good, and God being the sum total of everything, all the horror and all the blessing that humankind has done in this world, will eventually have another image, another name, and that name will be Echad, right? Kind of a unity, kind of a beautiful unity. So are we ready to pray that prayer? And any other thoughts or comments about it? I mean, I invite you to kind of take this and chew on it. I didn't expect anybody to raise their hand right away and say, yeah, sign me up, I'm a process theologian. But it's something that I really have been reading about and thinking about. And, the more you think about it, you'll realize that even other verses from the Bible come to mind, like this idea that God is the lure towards the good, right? Like when God creates the world in the story of Genesis, it says God sees everything that it is, and it's good, right? Like that creation has an orientation towards the good. That's just a bias that creation has. And that orientation toward the good, that possibility of reaching the good or moving in the direction of the good, that's another way of saying God, right? But God's not outside the picture. God's inside the picture and actually depends upon us, right? Abraham Joshua Heschel's famous book, God in Search of Man. It's not man in search of God, it's God in search of man. God looking to humankind as the only agent that is created in the image of God to act in a godly way, to act for the image of God. Oh, one more, Ellie. Right. Yeah. There's an economy of forgiveness, right? That by us becoming more forgiving, we bring more forgiveness into the world. That's another way of saying that God becomes more forgiving. I mean, the whole Kabbalistic, all the Kabbalistic magic and mysterious stuff is about, making the right tikkun, making the right fix, and adding a little chesed here, or a little bit of deen there, or a little bit of judgment here, or a little bit of severity here, or a little bit of beauty here, or a little bit of strength here, And by doing so, like they say, as above, so below. Like what we do here actually affects the Godhead. That's not process theology, that's Kabbalah. Yeah.
I'm saying almost like there's like another page where we're like on 165 of pray as if everything depended on God, but act as if everything depended on you.
Yeah. Same idea, right? So, yeah. I mean, I actually think that the Kabbalah itself, those of you who've studied a little bit of it, is really just the Jewish mystical way of stating this, right? That God kind of creates a world, the world is created out of God, out of different attributes of the divine, and we call them by different names. Chochmah, Bina. Bina means understanding, wisdom. I'm very, very fortunate that the gematria for my birthday this year is Bina. So I've been thinking about that. But, wisdom, understanding, love, limit, right, beauty. These are the Sephirot. These are just all different names for God as God interacts with the world. And the Kabbalists are always trying to fix that, find where is it broken? Where can I make the tikkun? Where can I make the fixing? Where can I put it right? So process theology is just, in the language of the philosophers, what is, I think, a very, very, very powerful Jewish idea. So let's pray it. Let's turn to the Aleinu on page 586. Thank you for your patience at the philosophy lecture. 586. Let's go to the very, very end. We can talk about this more at the Oneg, if you will, and I can recommend podcasts and books for you to read. So how about if we rise? How about if we rise on page 586? Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. 591, here's the punchline. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו echad. You may be seated. On page 598, we have the mourners' Kaddish. I'll read the names of the mourners this week in our congregation, and then if you have another name or if you wish to mention one, you may. Jeanette Eva Bliss, Joe Boardman, Nathan Boardman, Ruth Bragan, Herman Epstein, Kate Kessler, Rosalie Lovett, Frida Miller, Janet Meyerson, Joseph Oberman, Eugene Rosenwasser, Lila Ross, Abraham Shemesh, Hans Dreyfus, Nora Jacobson, Harry Omansky, Morris Rubin, William Lewis Shapiro, and we're still observing Shloshim for Elaine Mallon, the mother of Mark Mallon. So those of you who are observing periods of mourning or who wish to join the mourners are invited to rise for the mourners' Kaddish on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach leolam leomel maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiram v'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. May the one who makes peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel and all the world, and we all say, amen. So tonight we have a special oneg. I think it's in honor of my birthday. I think the board sponsored it. It's also special that we're not going to have it in Omansky Hall. We just said Kaddish for Harry Omansky. Did you know Harry Omansky? How many people in this room knew Harry Omansky? Raise your hand. Just Ellie? Bill? Did you know him? So, Omansky Hall is named after Harry Omansky, who's the architect we just read. But as you can hear through the door, for the past 2 weeks we've been hosting the homeless women from Pacha. All the churches in Charlottesville take their turns during the winter months when it's cold on the street, and we invite them to be here in our space, and they're using that space. And when you walk through, you'll see that this has kind of been their home for the past 2 weeks, and we don't want to disturb them because it's difficult enough to have to go from place to place. So what we're going to do is we'll just take our prayer books and put them back. Maybe the ushers will help us put them on. And then we invite everyone to go out this door or this door, and we'll just go down the stairs. We'll go down to the classroom wing, and I guess it's probably easier to go that way. Let's go that way. So just go out the door. We'll go to the main staircase, down the stairs, and then we'll enter into the classroom wing, and the very, very first classroom there, Charlotte Crystal, thank you to you, has set up the oneg. And I hope that everybody who greeted one another and said Shabbat Shalom and got to know somebody will go one step further and greet someone else, and we'll spend a little time together. So, kind of to end the service as we began, with that beautiful nigun that now we know so well. Yai rai rai da 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 rai da 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 rai da da da. Yai rai 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 da rai da. Yai rai rai da 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 rai da 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 rai da da da. Yai rai 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 da da da. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 da da da. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 da da da. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.